Time to A more of your cues. It's question and answer time, everyone. So I posted on YouTube asking if you had any questions related to painting and decorating, and I've gathered quite a few to go through with you today. Hopefully you'll get something from this video, whether you asked these questions or not, and if I didn't answer you this time, keep asking, because I'll get to you eventually, I promise. And also, FYI, I got these balloons on Valentine's Day about 3 months ago, and they're still floating. What's going on with this helium? All right, so the first question is about transitional neutrals from the Eclectic Kitchen. Thank you for asking. I know you touch on this now and then, or otherwise I wouldn't even know the term. But since I have rooms in warmer colors and others in cooler ones, I would love to hear a better idea of what transitional neutral choices I might have for hallways. So the first distinction I want to make is there's transitional neutrals, basically neutral colors within the transitional design style. But then there's just neutrals helping with transitions. That's the great thing about neutral colors in general, is they can help with those transitions from cool to warm. Because if you look at a grayish, for example, it's kind of warm because of the beige aspect, kind of cool because of the gray aspect. So together, joint forces, they connect the dots between those warmer and cooler parts of your home. And that's super useful and handy. Generally speaking, for a place like the hallway, that's the connective tissue of the home. That's at least how I describe it. It is important to pick something that can coexist with everything else in your home to a certain degree. But other than that, I would treat it like any other room in your home. What kind of feel or vibe do you want to portray within your hallway, for example? Do you want it to be cool and sleek? Then maybe you go with a cooler color. Or if you want warm, cozy, and inviting, maybe opt for a warmer leaning color. But in both cases, I think it is more common to go with something a bit more neutral, which is why you hear transitional, neutral, those two terms being used so often. But just in case you did mean neutrals from the transitional design style, here are some on the screen right now. Kelly Long asks, how do you know whether you should paint your ceilings the same as your walls? It seems like a move best used for something like a bedroom or an office rather than a main living space, but it feels so daunting. Well, guess what? It doesn't have to feel daunting, Kelly, because first of all, thank you for the question. I think whenever there's vaulted ceilings or angled ceilings, wherever there's sort of an ambiguous kind of break point of what's ceiling and what's wall, those are the cases where I almost always continue the wall color. It'll make your space feel bigger, more streamlined. You won't have this weird skinny ceiling panel for no reason. Otherwise, I usually almost always default to white ceilings, both from a simplicity standpoint, but the practical side too of white paint colors reflecting the most amount of light possible. So what's happening is you're getting a ton of light reflectance off of your overhead lighting, your chandeliers. If it's a darker color, you won't get as much light back, which means your room might be more dim, which is not a bad thing necessarily, but not what most people tend to go for. But you could totally also go with a really dark color in something like a powder room, which is a small space to begin with, and you could actually make it look a little bit bigger by going dark on the walls and then onto the ceiling as well. It becomes an intentional design choice. The darkness of the walls and ceilings might make it look like they're actually further away from you than they appear. So for the most part, just stick with white or off-white for the ceilings. Unless if you're going white or off-white for the walls, then definitely I would recommend continuing that all the way up. Just keep it nice and simple. Carolyn Walker, if someone were to show you a tile sample, what would you look at it in order to determine what goes with it for paint for the walls? This is great. There's a lot of ways you can interpret this. So when I have a tile that I'm working with, I definitely try and extract colors from that tile. And I'm trying to put the full picture in display in my head about what I want to achieve. So for example, if I have a darker tile that has a lot of elements to it, maybe I want to pick one of the lighter colors from that tile so I have some contrast of dark to light. Or if I want something a little more consistent and streamlined, then I might match it. Just find the closest paint color from the main dominant color within that tile. Or you can even find that color and then just move down a couple shades just so you're in the same family, but you still have that contrast. There's a lot of ways you can do it. I can even find a green tile and maybe I want to go complementary and get a red paint of some sort or a neutral with a red undertone. Wouldn't recommend that for everyone, that's just an idea. But whatever you decide to do, a tile can be used as a great tool. Bring it to the furniture stores you frequent so you have an idea of how this tile might look like with some of the chairs that are coming out this season. I don't know. But for me, just consider the contrast so there is a discernible difference. There's going to be a difference regardless because wall paint looks a lot different than tile. But coloration-wise between the two, I still want to see some definition and depth and texture. Make Our Own says, with beige coming back into style, what do you recommend for people who have lighter stained wood floors so that it doesn't end up looking like beige on beige on beige everywhere in the house? Yeah, beige is coming back for sure. But if you notice, a lot of the beigey rooms you see online oftentimes have white walls. So that's what I would recommend for a lot of people. Just go for white or off-white walls and even trim just to offset some of that beiginess. It'll allow your beige elements to stand out a bit more because your floor is also lighter too. You can also opt for lighter or even darker area rugs to cover up the floor in certain ways. That's a great way to change up the visual texture and depth within your flooring without replacing your flooring, because I'm sure it's really nice. So area rugs, why not? By doing that, you don't even need to consider so much what's going on your floors if they're mostly covered. Matt says, is it possible to use both warm and cool colors in the same room? Well, of course. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's such beauty in complementary color pairings, which are almost always cold and warm colors intermingling. They will give you a really charged, dynamic feel, which I think can be a good thing. It can be high reward, but also high risk, because you are sort of playing with fire and ice in a sense. By going the other way, you're just going for more monochromatic or at least an adjacent color scheme, which usually is within the same color family. But absolutely, feel free to explore with cool and warm. Even in this living area, I got a lot of gray elements, and then I got some fiery mustards, and then I got some taupes, and then I got some greens. So there is a lot you can do. If I were to give you some advice, however, it would be when you are incorporating cool and warm together, try and have some sense of a ratio where maybe you have one temperature that's a little more predominant, and then you have the other that's sprinkled in as a more supportive role. So I don't know, maybe 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 of a kind of split between cool and warm or warm and cool. That might be a good starting point. And like I said, it's all about vibes, right? Like, what's the vibe you want? Kind of lean into that a little bit more. We got a lacquer question. Beautiful. So Joan asks, our new sprayer recommends water-based lacquer. Must be a good sprayer. What do you recommend? Where to purchase and anything else we need to know? My husband used oil-based years ago when painting, and water-based is new for him. How long has it been around? To tell you the truth, water-based lacquer has been around for quite a while, for maybe 20 years or so, but we've only started seeing really big improvements in the last 5 years. Slowly, they're matching the solvent-based finishes in terms of quality and benefits, leveling, stain blocking capabilities. Water-based also has the huge advantage of ease of use. So it's usually a soap and water cleanup. You don't have to worry about thinners and things like that. You can get 1 and 2K systems if you want to dial in how heavy duty you're going. There's tons of options. Personally, kind of biased here, but Envirolak is my favorite lacquer to date. And you can actually buy it straight from us if you want to check the description down below. That would be my pitch to you. Try Envirolak. It's a Canadian-made company, but it's shipped all over North America. Tons of options, great primers, incredible top coats. Give water-based a shot, honestly. It's great. Jennifer asks, my house is red brick and stone rock. I like the natural elements, so I don't want to paint either one. I would like to know what color accents for the garage door and the trim, etc. Honestly, you have a lot of options here. My guess would be something like Riviera Pewter or Bracken Biscuit. Maybe for the front door, I kind of like blues and cooler greens. For garage doors, black and charcoal gray. We actually did a red brick exterior color pairing video that you can check out. I'll leave it in the description down below for you, Jennifer. But red brick is so classic, so I'm glad you're preserving it and trying to bolster it rather than painting over it, which I see some people do. I would like to know your take on black interior doors. I love them. I love black doors because they're dramatic, they're different, but technically they're just as neutral as white, although on the opposite end of the spectrum. So even though you'll have blacks that have an undertone of green or brown or purple or whatnot, white can be the exact same way. So just go with something, in my opinion, that's a little more neutral and soft, like Wrought Iron by Benjamin Moore. We can go with Downpipe by Pharaoh and Ball, although that one's a little green leaning, but still really great. And my approach to black doors is I tend to keep the trim or the frame around them white to go with the baseboards that probably continue throughout the home. You can paint your frame black to match it as well, but it's just sort of personal preference, so see what you like better. JJM, how do you cut in tall ceilings? Learn to fly. But seriously, you go with a ladder, a very bendy, flexible, tall ladder that can get into all sorts of shapes. And you can also get a brush extender. So essentially, it's just a clamp that attaches to a big extendable pole, and you can cut in with that. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way and just take some painter's tape and just tape it up to a broomstick and then go for it. It does take practice. You may need to touch up your ceiling afterwards, but it's probably the best and only real way that I know of. Okay, so Donna says, I know you've talked a little about this before, but are accent walls on their way out? Well, Donna, we just did a video all about accent walls that was actually inspired by this question right here. So check it out. I'll give you my whole thoughts on it and a bunch of ideas you can do that are still relevant today. Spoiler alert, yeah, I still like accent walls.